South African military has lost a member deployed in Mozambique after he was shot during an ambush this week. Soldiers deployed in Cabo Delgado as part of a SADC mission in Mozambique came under attack from insurgents during an ambush in the area east of Chai village. To talk more about this and the security situation there, we're joined tonight by security consultant Jasmine Opperman, who specializes in extremism and political violence. Jasmine, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the program. So, are South African soldiers and the broader SADC deployment, are they at increased risk currently in Cabo Delgado?
From the beginning, we have to understand that this is a complex operation. It is counterinsurgency. The terrain is extremely difficult to operate in. Samem has got the largest area to be responsible for. The rain season has started, and yes, as in any counterinsurgency operation, soldiers will always be vulnerable. What has happened here is that there were several attacks in east of Chai on villages. They went out with the Mozambican security forces. They run into the insurgents, and that is then where the ambush took place and where we sadly lost one of our soldiers. Thank heavens it was announced that all other soldiers are accounted for. Should we then, and it's a dreadful question to ask, but should we expect more military and even SANDF casualties? Because at this stage it appears the conflict is far from over. Yes, and I think it's good what you're saying. Let's be clear on this. The bad news is we are not near in terms of ending the insurgency. I expect the insurgency to increase its tempo following the rain season, more intense attacks in Cabo Delgado. There will be an expansion of the conflict area, as we've already seen in Nyasa, where there was an incident reported yesterday. So, yes, I'm afraid to say we must prepare ourselves that soldiers are going to pay the highest price in countering these insurgents. But at the same time, it is a necessity, and we cannot ignore, as a region, what is happening in Cabo Delgado. There's a statement out today by the official opposition in the country, the Democratic Alliance, which is saying it's concerned about a possible failure of intelligence on the back of the death of Corporal Khatebe in this ambush. At this point, based on the available information, because we know that further investigations are expected to commence, does it appear as though the intelligence failed? It is very easy to come to that conclusion. Intelligence plays a vital role. But keep in mind, intelligence sharing between all the forces present in Cabo Delgado is just as important. Was this an intelligence failure? The fact that they were hunting the insurgents, that they were on their case when they ran into them? I just think we must realize, and please stay sober, that even with the best intelligence, the risk of losing soldiers cannot be disregarded. But what is important is that we need the best operational tactical intelligence now, and therein lies questions. What is the level of coordination and cooperation in Cabo Delgado? Because clearly the accusations are being made that there are information leaks to the insurgents which allow them to execute ambushes with great precision. And there lies a security concern. And that leads me to my next question. How is it that these insurgents have managed to keep up the fight for so long? Because we've had the SADC deployment that has been in the region for months now. Some had expected, I think it was the Rwandans who arrived first, that more boots on the ground to assist the Mozambicans would defeat it. But clearly, they're not out for the count. No, and I think it comes back and it boils back to what are the end objectives of the different role players. If one looks at Rwanda responsible for the LNG corridor, is that the end objective? Just to secure that area, leaving some with a middle belt to be able to execute or to hold on to areas that will protect the LNG sector? What is the end objective of the Mozambican government in all of this? Herein lies a serious conflict of interest, aggravated by international role players, their presence by weapon companies making money, and training taking place in silo, which counters and makes it extremely difficult to have an integrated approach. That is crucial that we need now. But I need to add, I've seen now recently, there's not enough soldiers. How many soldiers do we have to deploy to counter the insurgents? For me, is an irrelevant question. We need to have soldiers that can sustain and persist, and for a long period, not for a short period. And then within that, the Mozambican government stepping in, using the opportunity to be able to counter at various levels the root causes of the forgotten Cabo Delgado. And that, I believe, is where the gap lies. Soldiers are not going to provide the final solution. They only enable an environment, and that is where diplomatic pressure has to start playing a role.
We'll speak to the other dynamics, specifically the economics question around this in a moment, but I want to go back to what you were just saying about how this is basically going to be a drawn-out conflict if the SADC forces hope to defeat the ISIL insurgency. Given that, how costly will it be? And B, who is assisting the insurgents to keep it going?
How costly is it going to be must be assessed against the threat we are facing in the region. Al-Sunna clearly is focused on Cabo Delgado, but there's another dimension. The Islamic State has now already claimed the attack against our forces. And for the region, the Islamic State institutionalized footprint, busy entrenching itself, is a serious threat. And I don't think we can in any way add any monetary value in countering their presence. For once they are present, you are not going to get rid of them. For the insurgents, at the end of the day, it's not an expensive operation. They do get their weapons. They do seize the weapons from the military, from their combats. They have clearly more than enough weapons. We're looking at around about 2,000 fighters, well armed. And for them, one bullet is enough to create fear and panic. And I think answering the question, where do they get, is an important question. But keep in mind, this is a cheap man's war from a guerrilla warfare perspective. And that creates and enables them time and space to operate in.
And Jasmine, you mentioned the fact that there needs to be diplomacy, right, to address the issues around, for example, the economic battle, because this is not just about pure violence.
Yes.
In Cabo Delgado, that region is rich in gas resources. In fact, at the time that this latest wave of fighting kicked off, there was a multinational that was in there hoping to extract some of this gas. The people there say they are from the region but have not benefited financially, and the insurgents have been able to seize upon the economic desperation and suffering of the people there. But does the group, this ISIL-aligned group, affiliated group, does it have a clear leader that can be spoken to, approached, to deal with those other issues that are affecting the further spread of fighting?
Your question, in terms of the LNG sector, I think the starting point is, and I think it's a misconception out there, has never been exactly a primary target up till today where we sit for the insurgents. But they've used that environment, like you've said, with a discontent being created. And herein comes the importance of the forgotten Cabo Delgado. If we want to counter, if we want to deviate and stop people supporting the insurgents, the governments will have to win the trust. How do they win the trust? By providing electricity, by building clinics? Yes, fine, that's good. But they need to win the hearts and the minds of the people in Cabo Delgado. And that is going to be a long term. There is no quick fix. And there's a long debate now. There needs to be dialogue with the insurgents. There needs to be sitting down and get to agreements. The bad news to your viewers is the government has little leverage and redirecting the insurgents, currently directing the momentum, directing the attacks, and that will not deviate the insurgents, will only empower them further.
And I asked the question of leadership for the extremists, not extremists, but insurgents in this case, because they are ISIL affiliated, they claim allegiance. But when you think of ISIL operations, for example, in Iraq, there was leadership in the form of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Is there such a figure in Mozambique?
What we have, and I'm hesitant to answer, but yes, I will answer your question with what we have at hand. At this moment, they already identified between 10 and 15 definite leaders. I'm not talking cell leaders that now are being killed, that's active in the field. There are senior leaders. There are people that is giving strategic direction. That's important. We need to understand they're well organized. So they are definite leaders. The problem is we don't even know where they are. The problem is we do not even know if they will be willing to talk. And I am skeptical because of the moment they have on their side. I do not think the environment now is conducive for dialogue. The insurgents are simply in too a powerful position to direct such dialogue. We need to win back that momentum, and we need to win it back quickly. For if not, I will be sitting here in 2-3 years' time and still discussing the insurgency with you, my friend.
Jasmine, so good to speak to you. That was security consultant specializing in extremism and political violence, Jasmine Opperman, speaking to us about developments in Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique on the back of confirmation that a South African corporal was killed in an ambush there. The corporal's name, Corporal Khatebe, his remains were returned to the country and given to his family at the Waterkloof Air Force Base. Today, he will be buried in the Free State where he was from.